Hello, how are you doing?
Good. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. I wanted to thank you for sharing that PowerPoint with me about the cemetery restoration. And when I was looking at it, I thought, oh, definitely need some more explanation about what was going on here. So I wanted to just touch base with you on the story about that and how that all came to be and have you talk
Yeah.
about that. So I
Okay.
kind of wanted to get a little bit of your background and then how you
Okay.
got involved with this project.
Okay. Well, I grew up, or I was born in Humboldt, or outside of Humboldt, Nebraska, and then family moved to Beatrice, and I went all through grade school and high school at Beatrice. Went to the Marines for about 8 years, and then came back and got a degree from UNL in archaeology, anthropology, and
Mhm.
then a master's degree at the University or Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. And then I've been doing archaeology all over the Southwest, Nebraska, Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico, and even some time in Hawaii. So, and then retired from the Park Service as an archaeologist in 2014. And that's it's not the very beginning of this story, but it's where I got a chance to dig into it more deeply. Um, um, and I was starting to do some family genealogy. Um, yeah, the cemetery itself was basically lost. We didn't really know where it was at. We didn't know much about it. So around 2001, my brother started doing some genealogy and found out that our third great grandparents were buried in a small cemetery about 2 miles west of Du Bois, Nebraska. A couple of years later, I think it was 2003, I went for a visit to Nebraska and decided to find the old homestead one where the great grandparents had homesteaded and to the cemetery, which turns out they're only a mile apart. I found the homestead, found the cemetery, and that's kind of where this starts. Is it was pretty dismal. I wouldn't call it a cemetery. There was no identifying marks, no fence. Turns out about 95% of it were planted in, the first time I saw it, in corn, and the second time in green beans or beans, soybeans. And the second time I went back, there was even less of an unplowed field. I was able to see a fragment of a headstone that was from my great-great-grandmother, Christina Boston, but only a fragment, and some other stones, and really didn't do too much looking around beyond just thing. It's kind of a mess. Didn't exactly know what to do, did some more genealogy, and I was at the time trying to track a Civil War quilt that my great-great-grandmother had made. Since they had homesteaded in this location near Du Bois, I thought it was made in Nebraska. But anyway, starting to do some more genealogy using the online and microfilm of the Pawnee Republican. Found out she was quilting, but couldn't track the quilt. But I did find, the cemetery had made a little more sense to me. Some mentions in what they called the Prairie Star locale. It was kind of a gossip column. I mean, all of the little areas had one. So when grandma so-and-so visited or something, they'd report on, but they'd also report on all kinds of things. And the things that started to strike me were the mention of deaths and burials, in a particular couple of individuals who were buried in Prairie Star Cemetery. And so now that I knew where that was at, I was able to kind of start putting things together a little bit more. And I think the first burial that I was able to confirm, the earliest burial was 1867. And I had to actually glance at my notes here just to make sure I could get the right one, because it gets a little confusing. I believe it was Frank Percival. So Frank Percival, and the cemetery was on Stephen D. Percival's homestead.
Okay.
And so that was, again, the first burial that I could confirm that was there. We still hadn't found all the headstones, but as I got more, did more digging, I found that in 1947, the cemetery, one had been abandoned, it had been overgrown, it was being farmed, and there was a newspaper article about, actually, it was in the county recorder. I found a record of the one of the county clerks authorizing the people who were farming that land at the time. I think they were renting the farm at the time, but farming it to clean it up because it had been abandoned and was in such bad shape. Well, all the stones were down already in 1947. And then again, I found another article and the documentation by Ruth Ann Hicks of cemeteries in Pawnee City, and for Prairie Star in 75, she could only identify 4 possible burials. And one was my great-great-grandmother and a couple of others, and one was even less than that, was just an initial. So, and somehow I got connected with really a key person in this whole restoration was Luella Henrich, who lives in Du Bois, who's active on Find a Grave and genealogy and all kinds of things. And she recalled, again, stories that sometime in the 1970s, a pickup truck showed up in Table Rock, I believe, with headstones in the back. Supposed somebody was in, the local bar, and they were probably part of that ransacking in the 70s. But, there was no names recalled.
Right.
It was just hearsay at that point. And there was no sense even falling down that, but started to get more interested in finding out who was buried there, when they were buried there. My brother owns a monument business in West Point, and so another key element that came about in that early research, actually in the recorder's office at Pawnee City, came across a warranty deed for what had been Stephen D. Percival's homestead, the location of this cemetery. He sold it to a Glassford or Glayford, a couple of different spellings, families. And a couple of years later, in 1887, 82, they sold it, the family sold it to the Dellenbach family. Well, so this is a warranty deed. It described the 160 acres, township range section, and so forth. But there was a note in there, and it says 160 acres with the exception of 2 acres in the northwest corner of the section to be reserved for a graveyard. So it had been sold, but the land had been sold, but the 2 acres that were the homestead or the cemetery had never been sold. So with that and the documentation we had, my brother started to put together a plan for rehabilitation. So we had the land surveyed. Luella and her son Doug went to local meetings with the county, and testified in those meetings to have the county recognized as an official cemetery. And there was a lot more went on than just a couple of meetings, but eventually the county adopted as official cemetery. My background is archaeologist, and we managed to contact the state archaeologist, Rob Bozell, and had it declared a archaeological site and given a site number that affords it some amount of protection, but it's like everything else if you want to destroy. Anyway, had it declared as archaeological site. Continued to do research on individuals who were buried there, and primarily from newspaper accounts. Once we had this kind of preliminary idea of how to do restoration, we decided we wanted to restore it to prairie grassland with native tailored juniper trees around the edge. We didn't want to fence it. Just one, the cost, but two, the fence doesn't stop anybody. We just wanted to identify where it was at. So we had huge boulders placed at 3 of the corners of this 2-acre parcel. Junipers planted in between to outline it. Prairie grass, re-sodded or grown. And then in the northwest corner, my brother made a brand new obelisk describing what was there. Prairie Star Cemetery, founded by early pioneers and so forth. And my brother was, since we had a partial headstone for my great-great-great-grandmother, but could never find one for her husband. And we knew from accounts that he'd been buried there in 1890. I took this new headstone for Christina and George Boston back to the site. And this was getting a little out of sequence here. I'm not following my notes, but before we had it identified as a recognized cemetery, that was when I took this headstone out and thought we were going to place it out there. And it had been plowed so much more that there was just barely enough for 2 cars to cover that area. And at the time, I have to admit, I was angry and I didn't know what to do. So I called the sheriff, thinking, oh, well, the sheriff is just going to say, what am I going to do? Well, no, she said, I'll be right out. And a half hour later, Jamie Reed, I believe, was the sheriff at the time, came out, and I told her the whole story. And I said, I don't really want to leave this stone here. It's going to be damaged more, whatever. He says, no, I could take care of it. I put her in my office and I could contact the landowner. And she's had a couple of other ideas. And so, I was on a trip and didn't have a lot of time. I said, well, okay, we'll have to figure things out. So she kept that stone for 8 months, contacted the landowner. The landowner representative coordinated that fall harvest so that the harvest didn't damage any more of the cemetery. And then, so after leaving the stone with her and then eventually having it set aside and starting the process of rehabilitation, we really realized that since there'd been so much disturbance, there was no way of knowing either through newspaper accounts or finding more headstones or whatever of how many individuals had actually been buried there.
Right.
Worked with some remote sensing and archaeology. We hired a team to do ground penetrating radar of that entire 2 acres to see if we could determine how many burials might have been buried there. I mean, we had, at the time, we were probably at 15 or 16 people we thought were buried there, but we didn't know. We didn't know, maybe there were 200. And
how would you know?
not knowing. Not that we're going to be able to match headstone A with
some ideas.
the location, but some idea. And so we spent a couple of days doing that survey, and we're in the ballpark. I mean, there's pluses and minuses for all that technology. I think we had 10 areas that were definitely likely graves, and 5 others were possible. And some of that has to do with the size of the individual. So there were small infants buried and so forth and so on. So, I mean, the good news is there aren't 200. The bad, not necessarily bad news. The best we can do is with the research we have of how many, and currently we're determined there are 20 individuals at least buried there.
Mhm.
And we have a list of that in the notes on that PowerPoint. But they're Percival's, Boston's, Young's, off the top of my head, I don't remember all of the names. But we've got some information, I'd say, on most of them, except sometimes it's just for an infant who's 4 months old, who's born and
Yeah.
died, and maybe the parents.
Right.
Because some of it comes from newspaper accounts and some comes from the headstone, and depends on what information is available. So that was our intention with the ground penetrating radar, is just to feel better about the number of people there and how long you want to just keep researching this. And so that's basically where it's at now. All the physical work was done by local people in cooperation with people, most of whom I've never met. I've met Luella several times. She and her son are wonderful. Their local scout troop was out to do some seeding and so forth, and lots of other people just helped along the way to
Mhm.
get the restoration, planting the trees on the side and so forth. And Luella and Doug continue to maintain the cemetery for us. The other thing that we did, worked with the Pawnee County network and had let's see, a nonprofit set up to fund the maintenance long-term for the cemetery.
Okay.
And so, we've
Yeah.
funded some of that, and it's there, anybody can chip in a nickel or whatever. We're really looking for people to do that, but if someone had
Yeah.
an ancestor who was buried there and they said, oh, it'd be nice, it's there. And so that's currently the status of it. It's back to Prairie from Corn and Beans, like the
Mhm.
title of the talk was. And we just feel a lot better that we're trying to honor everyone who's buried there. Actually, the other thing that we did, worked with the Pawnee County network and had let's see, a nonprofit set up to fund the maintenance long-term for the cemetery. Also proud of, my brother does QR codes or tags, and so he created one for that obelisk that's in the slideshow. And
Mhm.
so anybody that goes there with a smartphone can view that smart tag, and it'll pull you up to a dedicated website for Prairie Star Cemetery, and it'll give you all of the details and or photographs of all the individuals that we've researched, and this background as well on there. I think there's actually, there's not, there should be a copy of the report from the ground penetrating radar. So I mean, I just feel strongly that it's, it's not our story, it's the
Right.
story of homesteading in southeast Nebraska, and all
Yeah.
those individuals.
Yeah, I think I did see that QR code on one of those headstones even. And I thought that was so unique because what a great way to give people more information. So I thought that was amazing.
Physical restoration.
Yeah, yeah. Like from when you
Um,
first, I guess when you first kind of knew what we were dealing with to the point where you were actually scanning the ground and finding the graves, that was several years, right?
Actually, that was maybe 3-year period.
3 years, okay.
I mean, because it was done remotely, but again, local people did a lot of the work. After we got brought up the warranty deed and got it established as a official cemetery in the county,
Mhm.
then we started physical work on it. So it was about a 3-year period,
Okay,
including the ground penetrating radon.
yeah.
But the background was, well, from day one till today is about 24 years.
Yeah, I thought this was I really loved your photos of the process, and I wanted to ask you another thing was I saw there was a restored headstone that you had made or somebody had made for you, and I wanted to ask
Yeah,
you about that.
yeah. Doug
Yeah,
Henriksen is,
okay.
I don't know that he has had any experience carving, but he asked my brother if he could get a marble headstone that was the same shape and size as, I've forgotten the individual, can't remember which one, but anyway,
Yeah.
so my brother shipped him a marble headstone, and we've got photographs on that website for of him in his workshop with the original headstone and the new one, and he carved that, and it looks just exactly
Yeah,
like
I
the
thought it was
original.
amazing. That time
He-
period, the headstones of that time period, they all if you've done a lot of research in cemeteries, which I have, but, they all have that look. They have a certain
Right,
style, and,
right.
that I thought it was amazing, r duplication of it. It was just really amazing, and,
He's done a second one too, so I mean, again, just a fascinating person, just decided, I'm gonna see what I can do, and that's
yeah,
great.
amazing. I don't know that that's, so many of our cemeteries around here are in such bad, condition, and stone, when you go in, you see all these broken headstones, and
So County Attorney Elmo Whitty authorized Charles Burns and Zelma Burns to clean up said burial grounds and such part of said burial for farming purposes are not occupied by graves. Because the document was dated 47, did not record it till 68. The the document described the cemetery in 47 that quote that said burial grounds is only partially occupied and is in very bad condition. Many or most of the gravestones have fallen down and become broken. Trees and brush has grown thereon together with weeds and other vegetation that no one has been caring for the said cemetery for many years and so forth.
mm,
From that document. The other was, I guess, Ruth Ann Hicks' description of the site saying it had been vandalized and all of the stones had been thrown into the ditch adjacent to the road. And then that hearsay account of some stone showing up in the back of the truck sometimes in the 70s. So
there are these kind of little family cemeteries all over the place, um, and I think people would be surprised how many there really are.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, so what was your final takeaway from the project? Was there anything that you were surprised by or, just really was stand out to you about it?
Yeah, I think what stood out more was all the people locally there who wanted to get involved and who really did care.
That's great.
When you see something that's damaged and maybe vandalized and definitely kind of farmed over, you start to wonder, does anybody really care anymore? And so they do,
Yeah.
just not everyone at the same time, all the time, but there are a whole bunch of people out there who really do care about these small cemeteries and the people that are buried there and the families they represent. So that was
Yeah,
the best part of it for me.
yeah, but yeah, I just love that you sent that to us, and I was able to talk to you about it because it really just getting more of the backstory was really filled in a lot of the questions I had about it. So
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you so much, Richard. I enjoyed talking with you today.
That's what you do. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Yes, and send me anything else you want to share with about that. I'd love to look at it. So,
All right.
all
Have a
right.
good day.
Well, thank you. Talk to you later. Bye bye.